Now we're seeing it, Draven.
The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning.
Good morning, Shannon.
Good morning and welcome all of you to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Shannon Penrod.
And I'm Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson. Hey, we are kind of matching. You mentioned that.
I want to bring up, because I have a little visitor who's here with me, and he was so quiet. I did a 2-hour, I did a 2-hour talk this morning, and he was so quiet. He's here in the studio with me.
I have mine too somewhere.
This is Cheese, and he's
Hi,
saying
Cheese.
hello. So he just came over, he got a drink, which you could hear during the opening, and then he decided to come over and give me a foot lick because he's a foot licker. He's a foot licker from way back when. So this is Cheese. I know just a minute ago, when we were getting ready, I saw a big snout in the corner of your screen.
Right, that was Casey. Casey.
Oh, Casey, it looked like a big snout. Casey's just a little...
That's because she was close up to the screen.
Oh, I see.
I don't know where she jumped off to. She's around here somewhere.
Well, you're looking lovely today. You look all rock star today.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
You do. And we just want everybody to know we're going to be with you live for the next hour. And we got a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about, including some in the news, although my in the news has not arrived yet. But we also have a great guest that's joining us today, a regular on the show. Vince Redmond is going to be with us in a few minutes. He's a licensed and marriage family therapist. So we love having the opportunity to talk with him. And today we're going to talk about, with Vince, about the things that are hard to talk about with our kids, which there's a lot of things that are hard to talk about with our kids, aren't there, Nancy?
Definitely. A lot of topics that are difficult subjects to broach, and we can use Vince's advice on how to get into some of those.
And the reason why I suggested that we do that this week is that I've had a lot of emails this week in particular about, how do I talk to my teenage child about their diagnosis? We want to disclose, we have not used the A word, and we want to use the A word and make sure that it goes well. I'm having my news arrive. Thank you very much. Appreciate you. Thank you, kind sir.
That would be your husband?
I have production assistants. But yes, because I can't print. And so my son will print and my husband will deliver it, which is very fun. But yeah, so we've had several people who've written and asked, how do I tell my child on the spectrum that they're on the spectrum? But we've also had a lot of people. I want to remind everybody that tomorrow we're having the virtual memorial. We're hosting it. Autism Live and Card together, we're hosting it tomorrow. So please register. You do have to register in order to get the password to get into the meeting, but it's free and everybody is welcome.
You didn't mention it's for Joanne Laura.
Oh my gosh, how did I leave that out? It's for Joanne Laura, tomorrow, the virtual memorial. And we're encouraging people to come, and if you feel it's appropriate to bring your kiddo, if your kiddo knew Joanne and was a student, we think it's absolutely appropriate material for them, as far as I'm aware. And but many people have written and said, I'm having a hard time explaining that they're not going to be able to see Joanne anymore. As well as other people who didn't know Joanne writing in because there's been a death in the family recently. And they don't know how to explain COVID, and that some people die from COVID, but you don't automatically die from COVID. So we've had a lot of people writing in saying, I don't know how to have these tough conversations. So I thought it would be worth our while to have Vince address that with us and with the folks that are watching. But it occurs to me, Nancy, I haven't said that, excuse me, the show is meant to be interactive. We want to hear your thoughts and feelings and questions and concerns, not just for Vince, but also for Nancy and myself. But you can also write in questions that we can be ferrying to experts on a different day. But there are lots of different ways to connect. Right now, you might be watching us live on YouTube, on Periscope, on Twitter, or on our homepage, or on Facebook Live. You can watch us live in all of those places. We are Monday through Friday live right now, which has just been so much fun. And if you want to watch us later on, if the live hour is not conducive to your work schedule, we are still available in all those places later on, recorded. But we are also a free download, a free podcast on iTunes, on Deezer, on Spotify, and on iHeartRadio. So all of those places. But don't forget, autism-live.com is a great place to go so that you can look at all of the videos that we've ever done. They're archived very neatly in different categories so that you can search by a topic or a title or a person and be able to find some great interviews that we've done over the last 8.5 years. So please, partake however suits you. But Nancy,
you've been doing the show for 8.5 years?
Yeah.
Really? I didn't realize it's been that long.
Well, and so you started with us doing this like 6 months in. So yeah.
Wow,
yeah,
that's amazing.
8 years. 8 years that you and I have been doing this, Nancy.
Wow, that's amazing.
So, and at some point, hi Kamal. At some point we should, because you know what they do with presidents. You know how 8 years ages a president. At some point we should pictures up of us when we started. Of course, people don't have to go far. The opener still shows me 8 years ago.
Right.
And I look like a different person in a different era. I look like the difference between being, my daughter and being my grandparent. That's how it's all, right. Oh, Cheese, good doggy. Cheese is a good doggy. Thank you for writing that in. Okay. So you didn't realize it had been 8 years?
No, I sure didn't.
A lot of water has gone under this bridge, Nancy.
Yep, sure has.
I mean, come on, it's much different than it was 8 years ago. But we keep on ticking. So there are 8 years worth of videos to go back and look at and see if you like what you see. And there's got to be. And Amanda says, "Yep, I've been watching since my son was 3." Amanda, I can't, like you said yesterday that you wanted to meet. I can't, we have not met. Why do I feel like we have met? I thought that we had met, Amanda. Have we not? And if we haven't, we got to work that out. I mean, not during social distancing, but at some point we got to work that out. I'm not usually in hiding. I just am in hiding during this period of time. But anyway, we're excited to be here with you. We usually start our Let's Talk Autism with some news. You ready to do some news, Nancy?
Yeah, let me look my news up here.
Okay, so our first story is about the National Institute for Health, that they are letting us know. And I don't know why this just came back up now, because it's not new news, but I had not seen it before. And I thought that it was really interesting that in late 2019, they decided to give grants, $19 million.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. And that they decided to give the grants specifically to, I think it's 6 different organizations for studies about early detection and treatment of children with autism spectrum disorder. Because early detection and early treatment are a great way to optimize outcomes.
Yeah.
So, and I can hear a bunch of people screaming and going, yeah, but what if you miss that window? But in the future, wouldn't we all like, I mean, Nancy, I would give anything to have back the 6 months where we weren't attempting to do anything because we didn't know that our child had autism. Like I would just love, and then there was 6 months where a pediatrician should have diagnosed him, but didn't. From the first time that I went to the pediatrician and said, I think something's going on, there was 6 months until when I got the diagnosis. And then it was 6 months from when I got the diagnosis to when we started ABA. I would like to have that year back.
Well,
And
I had 2 years wasted.
and I know there are people watching who have had 10 years wasted. So, and as much as we want to focus on where we are now, and I think that's super important, we also want to leave a legacy that it's not the same way for a family down the road. So 6 different ways that they have granted money to, and I kind of wanted to just take a second and go, it's 7. I kind of wanted to just go through the different studies because I thought it was fascinating. So do you want to go every other one? Do you have that same page?
Yeah, I have the same page.
Okay, so do you want to take the first one, the community viable?
Yeah, the grants awarded include community viable screening for ASD in 9-month-old infants using quantitative eye tracking assays of social visual engagement.
Isn't that amazing? Like to be able to use eye tracking to figure out, I think.
In this study, researchers will measure the ability of an eye tracking based assessment of social visual engagement performed during children's 9-month well child visits to screen for ASD and other actionable developmental delays.
These give me hope. So the next one is validation of social communication checkup and autism risk indicator in the first year of life. And this will be out of Florida State University. The goal of the study is to validate the effectiveness of a new automated online screening tool, which is called the Social Communication Checkup. So it's called the SOCO, to screen for communication delay and autism at well child visits at 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, and 24 months of age. So they're going to do it and they're going to see how accurate it is. Because when our kids were diagnosed, they were supposed to be either the CARS or the MCHAT that was supposed to be done, I think, when they were 2 years old. And already that's like late. And then good luck if it actually happened. So I like that one. You want to take the next one?
Yeah, novel approaches to infant screening for ASD in pediatric primary care. The overall goal of this project is to develop and validate a novel screening tool called Sense to Know for use in a primary care setting. This tool identifies risk for ASD in infants based on patterns of attention, orienting, affect, vocalizations, and motor behavior.
Very good. Next one is neonatal cry acoustics and neurobehavioral characteristics as early markers of risk for autism spectrum disorder. This is out of Rhode Island. The project seeks to identify children at risk for autism in infancy by developing and validating a novel tool/process that analyzes features of crying and neurobehavior that preliminary evidence has shown may be atypical in infants at risk for autism. You know how, like right around when our kids were little, Nancy, they had that thing where they came out and they identified that our kids don't just cry, they have very specific cries, like one cry for when they're hungry. Well, now seeing that if these things are different, that it could be an at-risk thing for a diagnosis of autism. Go ahead. You want to take the next one?
Fascinating. Novel video-based approaches for detection of autism risk in the first year of life. In this study, the researchers aim to investigate and validate the video referenced infant rating system for autism, a brief web-based instrument that utilizes video depictions rather than written descriptions of behavior to detect signs of ASD.
Interesting that a lot of these are trying to target younger than a year. I find that fascinating. Okay, the next one is novel computer vision-based assessment of infant caregiver synchrony as an early level 2 screening tool for autism. See, this is where they would have caught Gem. And this is out of Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, CHOP. This project tests a new method of screening for ASD in infancy by detecting alterations in the dynamic social coordination between infants and caregivers during brief play-based interactions. Very
Why do you
interesting.
think this is where they could have caught Jem?
Because Jem was typically developing, and he was speaking, and he was vocal way earlier than he should have been, but he could not. For instance, I was breastfeeding him, and they tell you that when you're breastfeeding, you've got the baby there to make eye contact with the baby. But every time I would make eye contact with him, that was it. He would stop sucking. And we were concerned about his weight because he was losing weight. And eventually I was told, well, don't make eye contact with him. Let him just feed and make eye contact with him other places. But we discovered that there was something about, when I'm speaking, he still has a hard time. Like I said or did something the other day, and like for him, it's just different. The sound of my voice grates on him. So he just has a harder time. And I don't know whether it's because he had the voice in the womb or I'm just so entrancing, but it's like he can't listen to me and do other things. So, and I would say to them, why can't he suckle and look at me? Doesn't that seem odd? And they were like, no, it's fine. It's nothing. Just don't worry about it. Let him eat. But it was a thing. It was a thing. Okay. So you want to do the last one?
Yeah, development of a telehealth screener and assessment for infants at risk for ASD in diverse communities. The goal of this project is to develop a telehealth screener to assess infant early ASD symptoms that will improve families' access to specialized screening and decrease the significant wait time for an expert evaluation.
Because we are hearing every day about people who are waiting to get diagnoses. We've got folks who are saying hi from Egypt. And somebody said that we still look great, Nancy.
Oh, thank you. That's so kind of you.
And somebody else says, I lost a year from when testing was started to when we started treatment. Yeah. I really honestly think that it's funny. This morning, I was just doing a 2-hour talk for people who are just getting into the field. And I was saying, I feel like it was such a hard thing getting started when we got started. And I don't feel like there's been any improvement in that in 16 years. And
I know, and I wonder why that is.
Well, I have my theories about it. I think part of it is that it's convenient for insurance. Because if it takes you 3 months to get started, then that's 3 months that you didn't rack up any bills. But that's the wrong way to look at it. If insurance is looking at it that way, sometimes it's not that insurance is evil. It's just that, it comes with a whole lot of paperwork. They're a paper mill, insurance.
Yeah.
We have another person who's writing and saying hi from India. I love that. Thank you, guys.
Shannon,
we're so glad that you're here.
did you go through regional center when you first had Jem diagnosed?
We went first and got a private diagnosis and then went to regional center to corroborate, which is not the way that everybody does it, but I didn't know that. I called regional center on the first day and they were like, well, we'll have somebody call to do a phone assessment with you. But I think somebody said to me, this would be much easier if you just already had a diagnosis. And fortunately, we were with Kaiser, and with Kaiser, it was part of our plan that we had access to developmental pediatricians. So it didn't cost me anything. For a lot of people, it's like this big cost thing. But for us, it was the most cost effective thing for us was to get the diagnosis. And it was actually faster. It took us 3.5 months to get the appointment with Kaiser. And I might've paid a copay of $20 for our assessment. And there are people who are paying $5,000 and waiting 2 years for an assessment. So, I really lucked out. But then we went to the regional center and everybody was afraid that we weren't going to get corroboration from the regional center. And the guy was like, oh no, this kid definitely has autism. So what about you? Did you start with the regional center or did you go private?
Yeah,
first?
did not start with the regional center, started with a private clinic that did an assessment and said that he may be on the autism spectrum. I wasn't satisfied with what they were telling me. Went to the school district because he had just turned 3. and they sent a psychologist to evaluate him, and he was diagnosed with PDD-NOS, pervasive developmental disorder, nonspecific. And that school psychologist erroneously told me that regional center covered everything that was, well, everything that was non-educational. She said things like, oh my God, she said things like gymnastics
Mm.
and you know, leisure activities. And so I didn't go to regional center until he was 4, and then he was diagnosed with autism. And then I heard about CARD, and it took about 9 months to get CARD services.
Yeah.
And we paid privately in the beginning. So I lost 2 years.
Yeah. And I think for the parents that are out there watching, it's hard to put those years down.
Mhm.
Like we revisit them like an old wound, right? Like an old
Right,
bruise.
right.
And sure, like in the middle of the night, there's always times when I go, where would we be if we'd been able to start a year earlier? Like where would we be? Now, the better that Jen does, the less I focus on that. But there were years where that was my every waking moment was
Oh,
we
it's
lost
my
a year. We
it's
lost a year.
my every waking moment.
And I think it is for a lot of people, Nancy. And I think I was saying this morning to this group that I was talking to, I said, I'm really lucky in so many different ways. But one of the ways that I got luckiest quickest was that I for a long time, I was in the why does my child have autism? Like what happened? And there was a day when I was like, I don't know why. And I don't know if I'm ever going to get to know why. And so I'm going to stop. I'm going to retire from that debate society. And I'm going to just deal with what can I do about it now? Because it was making me full on crazy. And I feel like a lot of people are function in that space of still trying to figure out why. And I always, like, I don't want to say that I don't think that that's fruitful. I think somebody's got to look at that, right? I just knew I couldn't do it and do what I needed to do. But I feel bad for parents that are stuck in any other moment than this one. I understand it. But it's like, no matter what I do now, I'm never going to get that year back. I can work on it so that somebody else doesn't get it. And this morning I was sort of feeling that call to action, like we need to do something about that. We need to take up that mantle for the families, but I have to stop beating myself up about it. Do you feel that way too, Nancy?
Yes, I definitely feel that way. The shoulda, woulda, coulda plays a strong role. I mean, when I say I lost 2 years, I really lost 3 years because he could have been diagnosed at 2. And that was a year spent in denial and just not dealing with it from 2 to 3. And then, of course, I covered what 3 to almost 5 was like, and the running around of getting the proper treatment. First, it's the runaround of getting the diagnosis. Then it's the runaround of getting the correct interventions. So
well, and even then you don't arrive. Then it's still like trying to get to it's always trying to get to the next thing. There's no arrival.
Right.
Things get better when you've got services in place because you have more hope because you can see your child progressing, but it's not like you get to go, whoo, okay. Hey, I'm going to let Vince in. For some reason, I have the ability to do that today. And I'm going to let him in. We didn't get through all of the news, but I think that this is an important conversation.
We can go back to the news.
Yeah, we absolutely can. But I think it's an important conversation for Vince to be a part of. But Vince, are you there? Do you want to unmute? Hey.
Yeah.
There is Vince Redmond. And I want to remind everybody, Vince is a licensed marriage and family therapist, but he has sort of like extra asterisks after his name because Vince started out as a behavioral therapist doing ABA. So he has, 2 decades of experience working in the field of ABA?
Almost 3, unfortunately. I'm
Unfortunately?
dating myself, unfortunately, because that's dating myself.
We were talking about that earlier, that we've been doing the show for 8 years. We couldn't believe it.
Wow, that's true. Wow.
Yeah.
It goes by fast, huh?
It does.
Yes,
it does. And I just want to say, somebody wrote it in and said, I've been watching you ladies for years. Our son is 8 now. I can't tell you how much you've helped our family throughout the years. I love that. And somebody else says, I'm with you, Shannon. So to fill you in, Vince, what we were talking about is that the NIH has given a bunch of grants to try to get to early diagnosis to 7 different areas that they're going to try to get to focus on potentially getting diagnoses before a year. And we were both saying that it weighs on us how much time. For me, it was a year from when I believe he could have been diagnosed to when he started services. And from time to time, I think about that year. Nancy was saying for her that it's somewhere between 2 and 3 years.
3 years, yeah.
Wow.
And we know that there are people with us that, I know parents that it's more than a decade, and how we grieve that time and we kind of beat ourselves up sometimes over that time. I made the decision that I had to stop thinking about why he had autism and what I did wrong so that I could be in the moment. And one of our viewers said, I'm with you, Shannon. I had to get away from why and what level of autism. I moved on to who cares. I need to help him now. I need to learn everything I can. I need to just move forward. And that's where I got myself to. That doesn't mean I was there every day, but that's where that's the lane I tried to stay in. Because, and I'll be honest with you, it wasn't because I had it figured out or anything. I made that choice because otherwise I was going to lose my mind. And I did have a nervous breakdown because I was like, I'm screwing this up. And, I couldn't leave the house, whatever. And to get back on track, I had to stay in the present. So it wasn't some great evolved, oh, look at Shannon, she knows what she's doing. It was sheer desperation.
Right.
But Nancy, you were saying that sometimes you still struggle with the why.
I do. I think because of where Wyatt is now, I mean, he's still firmly on the autism spectrum. And, for me, he didn't make the gains that I had hoped he would. And so I tend to go back a lot to if only. And it does drive you crazy. I try to avoid going there, but it's hard not to go there sometimes.
Yeah.
To replay the past and replay, why wasn't I more in tune, or why didn't I do this or take that road? But, we take the road we take, and we've got to, like you said, get a handle on it and look to the future and look to the present. It doesn't do any good to go back and beat yourself up. Beating yourself up does no good whatsoever.
Isn't it funny, Vince? I hear Nancy saying this, and I know that I have had this conversation with myself where I'm like, why didn't I know to do X, Y, and Z on this day? And I will talk very harshly with myself about that. And I will still, now I will say, you're not going back, you're not doing that again. Make sure you do. But I will speak very harshly to myself. And I hear Nancy say that, and I'm like, gosh, Nancy, what were you supposed to be, some medical expert on you'd never had a child with autism before? How were you supposed to know? There were no billboards. Nobody was saying anything. How on earth would you have? I'm much kinder when I hear somebody else saying it. And I know you, Nancy, when we've been around a young mom who's saying that, and I should have known a year ago, you're like, oh, honey, cut yourself some slack.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we do that, Vince? Why do we beat up on ourselves? But we would say to somebody else, no, that's nobody would have known.
Because it's our kids. We're emotionally involved. It's our parental responsibility to make sure that we do everything we can to make them okay, even unrealistically, right?
Yeah.
The first thing that I was thinking of when I was thinking of you two, and in how you're how you were feeling when the kids were diagnosed compared to, even now when you start thinking back, right? Remember, we have a lot more knowledge now.
Yeah.
And you're putting the lens of who you are now on the lens who you were 14, 15 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Completely different ladies, completely different mothers, completely different situations. We didn't have the training, the expertise, the amount of exposure, amount of professionals that are even trained now back then. So you were getting a lot more flooded at that point with contradictory information, than now, right? Doctors that didn't believe it, doctors that were saying he'll grow out of it, school districts that said, no, we got this taken care of,
Yeah.
and so forth. I think there's still some of that nowadays, but not nearly as much as it was, 15, 18 years ago when your boys were very small, when they were getting diagnosed, right? So sometimes I think we inadvertently, and we don't do this by thought, we're applying what we know now and asking why didn't we know that then? And that's not fair. That's not
No.
fair to yourselves because A, it wasn't there, it wasn't present. You didn't have the 12 to 18 years of now experience, knowledge, in education. So like you said, we're doing ourselves a disservice when we use the lens we have now to critique who we were back then, because it's really it's apples and oranges at that point. But in our heart, it's because we feel that if we would have done something different, there would be a different result. And then we all know logically that's not true. It doesn't, there's no crystal ball. But emotionally, we're always, and we still will, that will never change, continue to do things for our kids in hopes that it's for their betterment, that it's going to help them. It's going to keep them safe. It's going to keep them, more adaptive, more connected with everybody around them. So I think we have to look, coming from an outside look, we have to look at, what lens are we looking through? And is that fair to ourselves, right?
Yeah. I love, is it Maya Angelou that had the phrase about, we did what we did when we knew what we knew, and when we knew better, we did better.
Yeah.
And I think that's very true. I want to read some of the things that people are writing in. The mom who said that, she had to be able to move on and move forward. She said, but to you, Nancy, I have days of my own where I have meltdowns, but I can't stay there. She just wanted you to know that.
Right.
And then somebody else said, I have no issues blaming the doctors. They didn't even mention the word ABA. And I think we've heard those stories, right? And then another person who in reference to the NIH, because if they can get it to where they can diagnose before a year, it would be great, right? And they said, wow, that would have been amazing. Our son was diagnosed at 2, and we had to push hard for that. At 1, he would have made so many more gains, brain development strongest in the first 3 years. And I want you to know, most of us are like, look at you got
Right.
a diagnosis at 2.
Two is so early.
You're like hitting it out of the park. Like, that's amazing. Because right now, it's funny, we were just talking about this morning, that a couple of years ago, the average age of a child on the autism spectrum when they were diagnosed was age 7. And then a couple of months ago, Dr. Granpiche said to me on the show, she said, do you know what the average age is for when? And I said, well, it used to be 7. And she said, no, it's 4.5. And I was like, wow, that's an improvement. And she said, don't you dare celebrate that. 4.5 is terrible. We need to get that closer to 2. So you're doing amazing.
2 is fantastic, because that is when you can really see the longevity of the delays, right? I think everyone can say that at about 1 or just after 1, we might be able to start seeing some delays, but yet it's not necessarily fluid yet. We haven't had too much developmental milestones to hit to be able to record it and see. But like you were saying, in the new studies, we're starting to come up with more milestones, different markers to look at, different checkpoints. But yeah, 2, in my experience now, I'm speaking of 27 years of experience, I would say 2 is a champion. That is fantastic.
We know for sure that 2 is a great place.
We're not that far behind. We got a lot of great treatment technologies, understanding, abilities, and treatments to be able to really jump on that right away.
Get that ABA and get your full prescription. Force them to give you 40 hours at 2, because that's the ticket. Absolutely. Now, this wasn't even the topic, but we just got, we obviously, we tripped onto something that was, But our topic we invited you this morning to talk about when we need to have the tough conversations with our kids, and there's lots of tough conversations. And the reason why I asked for this is because we've had a lot of emails in the last few weeks. I can think of 2 emails where people they said, we've got teenagers and we need to have the talk with them about their diagnosis. And that's a tough conversation. And then there's other conversations that are hard too that have come up. We just have had a lot of mail about that. So should we start with that, you guys, about how do we talk about diagnosis with our kiddos?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Sure. For me, the first thing is making sure that the parents are on the same page, right? It's first communicating with each other. What are the expectations? What do we want to? What information do we want to want them to know, right? It's not just about a label. It's not just about a name, right? Yeah, we can say, okay, you're autistic, but that means nothing, right? There's no understanding to that. So parents and caregivers, and this could go to some extended family too, maybe older siblings, grandparents, aunts and uncles, whoever are really caregiving and overseeing, because we want the message to be consistent. We want the information to be consistent. And then now once we have that consistency, and we all understand kind of what we want them to understand, what knowledge we want them to know, then it's good to start talking to them about it. Sitting down. This isn't a one-time sit down, here's your talk, we're done, right? This is going to come over time. Sitting down, asking them, do you have any questions? First, open up, ask them, because they probably do. Ask for questions. Have you noticed anything? You're in high school now. Do you notice anything different about the kids from high school than middle school? See if they start identifying differences. See if they start bringing up social concerns. See if they start bringing up different, maybe processing issues that they may be having. High school is very fast. Lots of knowledge, lots of things getting thrown at you 100 miles an hour. They're going to class every 50 minutes, right? It's very fast paced. Now you have your building blocks, right? Now you have your blocks that you can address separately, right? You can talk about learning, you can talk about socials, you can talk about processing, you can talk about self-confidence. All of that will lead up to, well, we learn differently, we have different, abilities, we have different successes, strengths and weaknesses. And then I think it's a personal choice in each family if they actually want to use the formal diagnosis as the information to tell them, or do they stick to talking about each individual block, each individual area of concern, I wouldn't say concern, but an area that they've identified as something that they're noticing in themselves different than their peers, and going from there, right? So there's really no one approach fits all, but for me, it's my recommendations are take it slow, ask questions, right, of the kids, see what they notice, make sure that we have agreement across caregivers on what the approach is going to be, because if they ask me one thing or talk to me about one thing, maybe they're going to talk to my father, grandpa, and ask a different question. Well, grandpa needs to know what we're doing, right? What to say, what is our approach going to be? If he asks Aunt Mary, am I different than other kids? Well, Aunt Mary now will have had, we've all talked about what to talk about, and she can turn around and say, well, what do you mean you're different? Give me an example. And we're back to question and then an answer. So again, lots of communication, not just communication directly with our child, but communication across all the caregivers that will be answering the same questions.
So I'm curious, Nancy, like when was the first time you guys talked to Wyatt and used the word autism? When did you have that talk?
It was when he was about 10, I believe, or 11, that I was trying to explain to him why he had therapists. He was going through a phase then of, I don't want teachers, we called them anymore.
Yeah.
And really rebelling against having ABA. And I told him he needed extra help because he was like, why do I have to have teachers? And I said, you need extra help because you have something called autism, which means that you need a little help in some of these areas. It doesn't mean you're less than, it just means you're different than the way some people are. And so I kind of came at it from that perspective.
We were a little bit different. I had heard of right after Jem was diagnosed, I heard of someone who had waited to tell their child, and he was like 4, so he was little, and one of the other kids at school told him with very negative language, and that just sent me spinning, right? And I was determined that I was going to fill him with we were going to normalize that word, and we were going to normalize it as something that's spectacular, and like the difference between having blonde hair or brown hair. And that and that we were going to do that so that by the time he went to school, that he was going to be sort of Teflon to anything that anybody would say. You know, very idealistic of me and naive. But so we started using the words when he was 2.5. And then I remember by the time he was 3, we loved American Idol and watched American Idol. And I don't know whether it was when he was 3 or 4-ish, right around there was when James Durbin was on American Idol. And every time James Durbin would be on, I would say, oh, look, there's James. James has the same name as you. And look, he's so talented. Don't we love? And we danced to James Durbin. And I would go, James is so fabulous. And James is a good singer and he plays the piano, and James has autism, just like you. Isn't that awesome? You have a lot of things in common with James. And, you know, that was just my thing constantly. So when we finally got to meet James Durbin, you know, Nancy, I just like sobbed and I was like, I used you as the role model for my son for a long time.
We had him on this show about 7 years ago.
Yeah. But it was a thing, you know, it was like, because you know what I remember? I remember Whoopi Goldberg talking about the fact that when she was a little girl, she saw Lieutenant Uhura on Star Trek. And she was like, she is like me and I am like her, and everything she can do, I can do. And I wanted that same thing for my son. I wanted him to see people who were capable and respected and revered. And autism was just a part of, so by the time he went to kindergarten, we had written a children's, like a social story, like you had a social story for Wyatt. We had one that was just about, and it's called My Name is Jem and I Have Autism. And it's a whole thing of, I have a backpack and I have parents and I have a video game and I have a tambourine and I have autism. And it's just one of the many things that I have. And sometimes people with autism are young and sometimes they're old, and sometimes they can talk and sometimes they can't. And it's just a thing. So I didn't have to have that big talk. I sort of bypassed it like really early. So I've loved all this information though for parents, Vince, about, you know, making sure that you have agreement about it. But I think it's super important to that thing that you were talking about. It's just a difference. It's not a less than, it's not a more than, it's not a get out of literally jail free card. It's, you know, and then the person who explained it to me and said it's the difference between a Mac and a PC. Right.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah. And that you can make a Mac do the things that PCs do with apps. But they are still processing things in a different way. So
I love it. I love that. Yeah. And I think that's and again, looking at the other spectrum or the other end, right? I was talking about the older kids, you know, that might just be becoming aware that there's differences, to instituting this very early on throughout their entire treatment plan, which I think is wonderful. The way both of you guys were doing it is great. Again, it wasn't a one-time, I did my checklist, I told him about it, I'm done. Right? This is an ongoing acceptance, identification, not a problem, you know, and you have these abilities and powers and uniquenesses that make you stronger than the next, different than the next, awesomer than the next, and and so forth. And that is a constant learning opportunity for them and self-esteem raising opportunity for them throughout their entire treatment plan. I think that's wonderful.
I just want to address some of the things that people are writing in, and some of it is about the previous conversation that we were having. One person who I just adore said, I had to do my own research, and that is when I found Autism Live, Skills, Shannon, Dr. Adele, Dr. Nadowski, Dr. Tarbox, and of course, Dr. Granpichet. And then I went to work, and now I'm an RBT, and eventually I will get my BCABA. I can't promise anything further than that now with 3 special needs kids, but we're sending you love and hugs because you're killing it.
Unbelievable.
Isn't that amazing?
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And another person who said, I was fighting with specialists for around 4 to 5 years for my daughter to be diagnosed because according to them, she was copying her brother, even when I knew they didn't interact. My daughter was struggling in school, even getting suspended. When she was finally diagnosed, I struggled with blaming myself and blaming the doctors. I wasted 1 more year, but now she's thriving, AB on a roll, and now I'm looking forward to the future. And in my son's case, ABA has been a great improvement for him. I do struggle a lot, but lately our good SJ days, I don't know what that means. Our good I don't know what that means, exceed the days we struggle, and he was diagnosed at 2. So sending you a hug. Disha says, hi, Shannon. And she says, I'm continuously talking to my son, but he is not understanding things. He doesn't know the concept of yes and no. What can we do in such a case? He's 3.7 years old. Vince, do you, I mean, I'm sure Nancy and I would recommend ABA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, of course. I mean, if we're talking about talking to him about his differences, or are we talking about the type, what services, resources that they should,
that's
into?
Interesting. I because she goes on to say he doesn't know the concept of yes and no. I think it's just a general question that she talks to him and he doesn't seem to understand things, that the receptive language isn't there. Right. But in either case, if you've got somebody who's 3.5 and doesn't know the concept of yes and no, ABA can absolutely help there.
Absolutely. And help in many different ways, right? Going back to your receptive, expressive language, vocal, non-vocal, communicating. There's a lot of communication, language development, behavioral language development. That is absolutely something that ABA really, really strives on. I mean, our verbal behavior, curriculum across all ABA disciplines. I'm not just saying CARD in particular. Are aimed at functional language, functional understanding of language, functional usage of language, making sure that they understand how to ask for things, how to label things, how to interact with other people appropriately. That's something that starts at a very young age, right? And it's not too late, and it's something that actually it really should be addressed immediately.
Yeah. And for people who are watching and, maybe you're new to the show or you don't know ABA, we want to start out by telling you that a great place to go to start, near and dear to my heart, and I think to Nancy's heart as well, go to www.centerforautism.com and look under the locations tab, first of all, to see if CARD is available and has offices close to you. You will see that there's Vince, like 260 offices. So if you're in the United States, there might be an office that's close to you. If there isn't a CARD office that's close to you, I would encourage you to look for a quality ABA program that is close to you. You can just Google ABA for autism. You don't want just ABA, you want ABA for autism, and put the name of your city in. There are a couple of directories, like I think Autism Speaks, but it's not necessarily up to date. But I would recommend CARD first, and that's just a reality, because that's what my son had, and that's what I want you to have. But there are other good quality ABA providers that are out there as well. That's important. If you find that there isn't an ABA provider near you, because I know many of you are writing in from other countries, and you may not have those resources available to you, I want to make sure that you know about a website called Skills for Autism. It's www.skillsforautism. And if you go there, it's the entire curriculum of what they do at CARD. And it's available. It's a subscription that you can be working on the same things with your children that Nancy and I had working with our kids. And if you want to know how to do those lessons, you want to get trained like the other mom who's saying that she's an RBT and going to be a BCA BA. I don't think I have the letters right, but you know what I'm trying to say.
You're right.
But there is a website where you can train online, and it's very inexpensive compared to anything educational, right? It's called ibehavioraltraining.com. It's the Institute for Behavioral Training. And you can actually do the coursework online to be a registered behavior technician or a board certified autism technician in about 40 hours. There's more to get the actual certificate offline. But I think the cost of it is, if you do the whole thing, it's right around $400. If you call them and tell them that you're friends with me and that you want the friends and family discount, I think it's a 10% discount they give you. So drop my name, because I love it when people learn. Learning is a great thing. But if you have something that isn't working and something you see, a skill that you want your child to do, or a challenging behavior that your child is having that's preventing them and you from living your best life, please seek out ABA. That is the gold standard for treatment. And here in the United States, all 50 states have mandates now for insurance to cover it. So please get yourself that help. Now, we've got a few more minutes left. I can't believe that took that long, but that's important. We did have a lot of people writing in this week, Vince. Tomorrow, we're having the virtual memorial for our good friend, Joanne Lara. And we hope that everybody will join us at that. It's free and it's online and everybody can come to that. We've had many parents writing in and saying they don't know how to explain death, and specifically Joanne's death, to her students, to their children, and asking, how do you explain this to our kids?
And I think a lot of that obviously has to do with their level of understanding of things, right? So the way we would talk to, say, a preschool or kindergarten to someone who's, to a young adult or a teen would be completely different. But I think the idea is talking about life cycles, right? How much, and also how connected to the person who's passed away as well, right? I mean, it might be completely different from a parent than from an extended family member or a neighbor or a friend that they don't have a real tight emotional connection to. But talking to them about life cycles, talking to them about the birth, living, dying, it's part of a life cycle. It's part of every living organism's life cycle. Using each family's individual religious beliefs is important, right? If you're getting support with this through your AB agency, make sure you talk to them about your religious beliefs. What do we believe? Do they go to heaven? Do they go to another place? Is there rebirth? Is there, we want to support your belief in your families to make sure that the child understands the religious connotations to death, right, or into rebirth. So there are a lot of different points. I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but it is a very serious, subject that comes up, and it's going to continue to come up over different phases of their life. So we address it a little bit differently depending on what developmental stage they're in. But younger kids, we talk more about life cycles and permanency. The older kids, it's a little bit more of emotional. What are you going to miss? What good memories did you have? And looking at, having them process the actual grief that they would be feeling, as well as what would be something that they can do to celebrate that person. In like the memorial tomorrow is a great example. We're celebrating because they were great people. They loved everybody. And this is what we do. It's like a birthday party. We do that for people that are living. This is what we do when they pass. And we make it a positive experience for them, which will help them process their grief.
And that's so helpful, Vince. Thank you so much, because I know a lot of people have been asking for that. We're almost out of time and we have a couple of more things. Michelle has written and said, have a safe week. Somebody said, I had to talk to my daughter about the diagnosis right after she was diagnosed at 7. Her classmates were calling her names like weird. And I do think that, unfortunately, the world, I think if we could do it any way we want to, it might be different, but the world is going to say things to your child about being different. And man, I want to change that, but that is a thing. But then really quickly, we,
To
in
some
fact,
extent, change the definition, change the power of that word.
yes,
You're weird. I'm wonderfully weird.
yeah,
It's fantastic.
Celebrate your weirdness.
I'm not like that person. I am different. I am wonderful. I am
Mhm.
wonderfully weird. And if we change the definition of that,
yeah.
it's not as powerful. It's not as painful as the other child might intend it to be, which means then it becomes non-functional and they'll stop doing it.
Thank you so much for that, Vince. And just as we get ready to part here, I want to say to Johanny, who's written in about a language thing, the word you're looking for is intraverbal. That's the word you're looking for. And I just want to remind you that I have offered to do a skills run through with you personally, one-to-one. All you have to do is email me, and I'm happy to set that up so that we can do that.
I
Vince,
like
I
it.
want to
The
thank
official
you.
terms.
What's that?
I said, I love it. The official terms.
Yeah, she was like, I want to know what's the thing when, and that's it. It's intraverbal. Intraverbal is what you're looking for. And there are lots of lessons in skills to help our kids
Oh,
get to
absolutely.
intraverbal. And I see a lot of times that this is very typical, that students will learn things and they'll learn labels. And parents will write in and say to us, okay, so my child can label all these things, but we are not yet at conversation where they can take the words that they know and put them in a sentence. That's what you want, is you want to get them to intraverbals. So, but that can absolutely be worked on, and it's a phase, and all kids go through that, even ones who don't have autism. So that can be worked on. I want to thank both of you for being here, Nancy and Vince. And we didn't get through half of what we said we were going to talk about, but I think we talked about what was important today.
Yeah.
So that's always, I'm like, well, let's do that. But thank you guys so much for being here. Vince, where is there a place that you like to give out to if people need to reach out to you? You don't have to.
Yeah, no, of course. They can email me at v.redmond, Redmond, just my name, at centerforautism.com.
Wonderful. And if you need to get a hold of me other than through the chat, you can always reach me at s.penrod@autism-live.com. And if you need to get a hold of Nancy, send it to me and I'll send it to her.
And let's remind everybody about the memorial service tomorrow. It's a good way for kids to also process by seeing a celebration of Joanne Laura's life.
Yeah, and normally we would be meeting in person, but since that is impossible right now, not here in Southern California, we're having it virtually. Now, here's the benefit, is that everybody around the world can come to this virtual celebration of her life. It starts at 10:30 Pacific time, so that's 1:30 Eastern time. And then I know a lot of you are watching. I know that we talked about, we wanted to make sure, because she had a lot of friends and students in India. And so I believe that means that it's at 11 p.m. at night in India, but that's the only other time zone that I'm fairly certain of, because we were trying to hit a time where we could hit as many time zones as possible. At that time, and what happens is that you'll register, because there's a password to get in, there's no cost. But on our Facebook, you'll see there's a post, find the link where you go to register. You'll get an email, and in the email, there'll be a link and a password. That's what you need to get on. We will open the doors to the room 15 minutes beforehand so that everybody can come in and get a virtual seat. And we have some music that Joanne had picked out to play during that time. Then there will be a program that's approximately 45 to 50 minutes long. We've got some amazing people: Ed Asner, Joe Montaigne, Chuck Saffler, Dr. Temple Grandin, Dr. Stephen Shore, Dr. Grampiche. These are the people who are going to be speaking briefly, and a couple of musical performances, and some videos of pictures of Joanne's life, again with music that she chose, and one new song that was written for her by a Grammy-nominated artist that literally takes my breath away. Nancy's heard it. Did it not take your breath away?
Really
Amazing.
an amazing song. What a tribute.
Right. And then at the very, so once the program is over, we're going to open it up to everybody, all the viewers, all the people that are there watching, and you'll have an opportunity to raise your hand and have your mic be made hot so that you can give a remembrance of Joanne. We're asking that those be 2 minutes or less, because we think that there will be a lot of people, and Traven and I are going to be, running the technical elements of it. And we're going to stay until everybody's had an opportunity to say, and that might take hours. But if your kiddo wants to say something, you just have to be patient, because I'm sure that there are going to be a lot of people who are going to want to say something, but we're going to be there and celebrating Joanne's life. We are thanking already the internet for working for tomorrow. I was told that that's what I needed to say instead of saying, I hope it works, saying thank you for good internet tomorrow. Thank you. We appreciate the good internet signal for everyone to be able to see all that we have planned for you to see and hear. It touches my heart greatly how much everybody has been on board and said, what an amazing lady Joanne was, and we want to remember her. So that is tomorrow, 10:30 Pacific time. Please do the math where you are, but please register for it's a webinar format. So we're looking forward to being there with you. And I thank you guys for everything. And you guys have been amazing rocks for me in these last 2 weeks. Because I know Joanne was a really good friend of yours, Nancy, and Vince, you have been so helpful and supportive. I've really appreciated you.
Anytime.
All right, we're out of time. We're past time, but thank you guys. We're going to be back on Monday. Bonnie Yates, special education attorney, will be with us on Monday. And by the way, on Monday, I'm going to be on a radio show, Swathy's radio show. I can't pronounce her last name. Don't ask me to. But that's also posted on our page as well if you want to tune in to hear me be interviewed. I'm going to be on the other side of the table on Monday afternoon. All right. What's that?
I said a new seat for you.
Yeah, new seat for me to be on the other side. Watch, I'll end up asking her questions because I don't know how to do it.
Swathy of jewelry fame?
Yes, Siri's mom. She has her own radio show. And
Swathy does or Siri?
Swathy the mom has her own radio show.
Right.
And I've been on it before, but it's been a while. So it's a big honor to be back on it. All right, you guys, we got to go. But we'll be back on Monday. Until then, we'll be back tomorrow. But until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too.
And yourself a hug from me. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Shannon.